Coming to you from an undisclosed location, somewhere deep in the heart of the Santa Monica Mountains, I am your intrepid host, L.A. Marzulli. Thanks so much for watching us. Hit the subscribe button below. We also have 2 tiers, so you can pay for paid content for members only. More about that when John Adam runs the commercial. But my guest today is Angel Castro. He's a philosopher, for lack of a better description. I consider him a friend. I just met him a few weeks ago, and one thing led to another, and here we are. We're going to talk about critical thinking and what's happening on many campuses all over the United States. There's a huge lack of critical thinking, and we'll get into that. But first, a word from our very trusted sponsor.
The 401k was never designed to make you wealthy. It was built to shift risk onto you, leaving your retirement exposed to Wall Street's crashes, inflation, and chaos. That's why thousands of Americans are moving into gold. Noble Gold helps Americans just like you roll over part of their 401k into real physical gold. Tax advantage, penalty free, and shock proof. Get your free wealth protection kit now at noblegoldinvestments.com. Once again, that's noblegoldinvestments.com. Take back control before it's too late. And folks, get rewarded for getting started. Open a qualified account at noblegoldinvestments.com, and Noble Gold will send you 2 5-ounce Silver America the Beautiful coins free. Once again, folks, noblegoldinvestments.com. Peggy and I invested several years ago, and I have to tell you, we are really glad we did. As with any investment, there's always a certain amount of risk, so look at the information carefully and then make your own decision.
Angel, thanks so much for coming on the record. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So give us a little bit about your background, because, essentially you're an unknown, at least right now. But now that you're here, thousands of people will see you. So give us a backstory. Tell us a little bit about yourself and about your journey and why you picked, a degree in philosophy.
Sure. Yeah, no, I would love to. So I have a degree in philosophy from UC Santa Barbara. I'm from Northern California, and it's been quite a journey for me. So philosophy, well, my emphasis is on ethics and public policy. And then I also study philosophy of mind, freedom and determinism, and then philosophy of religion. So this all started with when I had taken classes continuously throughout my life. I wasn't really thinking about a philosophy degree. I wasn't really thinking about anything. It's just that I enjoyed the education. And so that's kind of what I did. And as I lived in Northern California, I kind of looked at these problems that we have in this world when it comes to schools. And I noticed a major problem. And one of the most concerning is school violence.
Mm.
We know that regulation has really done nothing as far as school violence is concerned. It hasn't been able to sequester any type of school violence. And it had got to the point where a lot of our schools look like prisons. They're completely surrounded. They're guarded. They have huge gates, walls, and they've turned into prisons. And that was very, very sad to me. And so a lot of my conviction came because I felt that we could fix this problem through education, through critical thinking, through reasoning, through logic, because these acts of violence are not reasonable. They're not logical. They don't make sense. And a lot of times, as I've done more research on them, it's been social outliers. And we create these social outliers in our education system because of our lack of socialization skills.
So you're talking outliers. You're talking people that are bullied, picked on, outside the normal clique. And this is, look, let me just digress here for a minute. When I was in high school, I was a senior, and, I was a hippie. I was in a rock and roll band, and the greasers were going to, beat us up and cut off all of our hair. And my good friend Tom, and I won't say his last name, we planned something. We hopped on a train and we hightailed it out of there. We were gone for 2 weeks. No one knew where we were. So when we finally came back, they wanted to dedicate the yearbook to me. The people would have none of it. I was not allowed to graduate with my class. I had to finish high school outside. In other words, not one teacher came to our aid. And we weren't violent. We chose the exact opposite. But that decision impacted the rest of my life. So I mean, I'm walking proof of that. And it's we actually went, let me just finish it by saying this. We actually went to the assistant principal, to teachers. We told them this was happening. We got laughed at. Nobody did anything. Pick up a story from there.
Yeah, and that's really really unfortunate because the school system, they don't have any valuable response mechanism for what's going on. They don't know how to respond, and they don't know what to do. And there's a lot of lack of support, so to speak, when it comes to bullying and mistreatment. And so we feel through education we could correct some of these issues. Because when it comes to social outliers, a lot of it comes from a lack of critical thinking, a lack of open-mindedness. And so when we look at this curriculum that I'm beginning to develop, it's more of social integration and solving problems, critical problems, using critical thinking and doing it in a group setting. And this allows others to work individually and in groups with other minds. And then you get a better appreciation of how these other minds work, how these other people think. And if we can do that, then we can start closing that gap of social integration, because that's another thing that technology has done to our school system.
Yes.
And when I was in school, I didn't have these problems with technology because we didn't have computers that we were carrying around everywhere. But you look at these socialization skills in the classrooms today, and they're non-existent.
Wow.
Because we don't socialize like we're supposed to. Children don't socialize like they're supposed to. And of course, there's safety concerns and stuff like that. But as far as technology is concerned, we can't eliminate the technology. Technology isn't going anywhere. So I'm building a curriculum that starts off with critical thinking, critical analysis, problem solving, social integration, and then technology. And the technology part is, we understand that we cannot eliminate technology. We're not going to get rid of it. We can't tell them not to use it. It's there. It's here. It's getting better. It's getting stronger. It's getting smarter. But what we can do is we can teach children how to have a better relationship with your technology and help them understand what the technology is trying to do, what social media is trying to do, what it's trying to tell them, what it's trying to teach them, what message is it sending to them.
Mm-hmm.
Because as we look at this and we look at young adolescents, 10 to 13, and then middle adolescence, and then late adolescence, 13, 14, 15, all the way up to 18, 19, they are susceptible to radical ideology.
Very much so.
And a lot of these problems that we're having are because of these radical ideologies. So if we could stop the radical ideologies, not by trying to prohibit them from the internet or social media or anything like that, but just give them the tools and the skills to be able to counter these arguments.
Now, I got to stop you there. I want our listeners and our viewers to understand, when you talk radical ideology, give us an example of that, because that I can think of several, but I'd rather have you tell us, from your wheelhouse, what are some of these radical ideologies that they're speaking of?
Yeah, so one of the major ones that we have right now, and we've seen it throughout even the college campuses, and I believe this begins in the adolescent ages, which is anti-Semitism.
Right.
And that's a major problem. Major lawsuits. It's all around the country right now, and I think it's from a misunderstanding of the problem, and we haven't critically analyzed this problem. It is a big problem, and we know that. And I'm not saying that it's not okay, or that I'm not saying that we shouldn't be empathetic to what's happening, especially when it comes to wars and a lot of innocent people are involved. And it's okay as a Christian to be empathetic towards that. But what it's not okay is to say, we hate so-and-so, we hate so-and-so, and this is what's happening, this is why we hate so-and-so. And that's kind of what's happening. And the other one is we have the racism issue, the white supremacy issue. That is very prevalent in a lot of schools, especially in the Midwest. And a lot of these acts of violence are racial motivated. And that's really sad if you think about it, because we should be, as a society, we should be beyond that already. But they're getting this information. They're reading these articles and these books, and they're falling into these radical ideologies
Right.
and committing these terrible crimes based on these ideologies. And that's not right. And obviously, they're not in the right to murder innocent people. That's basic ethics. That's basic morality. But if we could teach them about this and really teach them about humanity, if we can give them a greater respect for humanity and their peers, then we could eliminate, like I talked about, like these social outliers and eliminate these radical ideologies. And if we do that, then we can begin to sequester this violence and this terrible behavior that's going on in our school systems.
Well, what about, families who are completely dysfunctional? I mean, and I've seen this. I mean, I know people, and I'm not going to mention any names, but they come from extremely dysfunctional families. And these kids that come from these families, they think this is normal. I mean, they think that, well, this is the way everybody lives. They don't realize that you're in a completely dysfunctional home. There is no love. You're being yelled at. You're being beaten. The mother's an alcoholic. The dad is whatever, a fornicator. I mean, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But there's no love. There's no, and it's, even within the churches. I mean, people go in the pews and everybody smiles and stuff. But and I've been a Christian for 45 years, and I've seen a lot of dysfunction within the church, a lot of dysfunction. So let me ask you this. I hear what you're saying, and it looks great on paper, but isn't the underlying blame here is man's fallen nature? Isn't really that's what we're looking at? Because it just that sin nature, it just is constantly acting, even after 45 years, I'm dragging the old man around with me. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and that's what I love about education is I do believe that if we do this the right way, that education could be a safe place, and that's really what we want to create is a safe place away from this violence, and that's really what schools sometimes are for a lot of these children.
That's true.
That are being starved because their family doesn't feed them. They're going to school to eat. They're going to school to get away from everything. And it's really unfortunate, but that's the way our schools should be. And that's the way our schools should be as far as ideology is concerned too as well. We should have a safe space. We should have an open dialogue to talk about these things and see, where this information is coming from. Is it factual information? Is it just subjective information? But yeah, when we talk about freedom and determinism, we look at a lot of things, and I think one thing that's important, and this goes on to as the children get older into college, they start to lose that faith. They've kind of lost faith in humanity, and they tie that to, well, I've lost faith in humanity because Christianity just isn't working.
Yeah.
It's not there. What happened to it?
Right.
I was told in church and in Sunday school and everything that God is all powerful and he's in control. And then we look at the world today and we're like, well, and some people do, and they look at the world and they say, you know what? Whoever's in control here
is not in control.
Is not in control. He's lost control. Yeah, that's a misunderstanding of theology.
I agree.
And so when we look at this world, it is a fallen world. That was explained multiple times in the Bible. One time was when Jesus was on the mountain and he was being tempted. He was fasting, and Satan came to him and he says, "You know what? Look at everything out here. Look at the world. If you kneel down and worship me, I'll give it to you. It's you." And Jesus didn't argue with them and said, well, wait a minute, the world's not yours to give. You're not in control of the world. It was his to give. It had fallen. It is in his hands. And he said to his disciples that the ruler of this world is coming.
That's right.
And I'm not going to be with you for much longer. And he has no power over me. But the ruler of this world, and we know who he's talking about, right? You're sure talking about Satan, the ruler of this world is coming. And so there's multiple instances of that. And that's why it's important for Christians to be agents for change. And that's really what our responsibility is. And that's why it says you'll put on the full armor of God. Because there's going to be a time where you have to stand up against the fiery darts of the wicked one.
It's interesting. We have friends. Again, I can't mention names, but they started to send their children to a public school, and the kid was around 6, 7 years old. They homeschooled him for a while, then they moved him into a public school. And after like 6 months, they yanked him out of that. Why? He started coming back with language problems, learning swear words, learning this, learning everything that you don't want your kid to learn. He was learning it in school. So they put him in a Christian school. Not that that's bulletproof, but it changed the paradigm. I want to ask you something, and maybe you don't know anything about this, but I remember reading an article about Japanese schools and the way the kids are taught.
Yeah.
It's and for the life of me, I don't understand why we haven't adopted this in the school system, because it's amazing. If you know about that, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I have researched that, and I'm really, really amazed by how well of a job they do in the Japanese education system. It's very disciplined. It's very, it's very open as well. It's very ordered. And one thing I like about the most is I think, when you look at our education system, it's time to raise the standard and what we expect from our teacher. And, I am married to a teacher, so I want to enter the education system. Obviously, writing this curriculum, I want to get in front of students, and I already have in some capacity. And one thing to do, and the very first thing I do, is when I show up in a classroom, I look like this. I look like a professional, because that's the way I want them to see me as a professional. And when you look at the Japanese school systems,
Same thing.
look at all the professional.
Oh yeah.
How they're dressed. They're in shirts and ties. They're in dress shirts. They're in either dress skirts or dress pants. And they're very, very professional, very respectable. And the students treat them that way. They treat them like professionals. I look at how they get the children involved at an early age. They are a true community. When you look at their kindergarten, first grade, second grade, they serve each other lunches. They clean up. They help. I'm responsible for sweeping. You grab the dustpan. You put all the chairs away. They're it's amazing. Like, they're working as a true community. So they do have this sense of community that we don't have.
No, we are so disjunct as a culture. Well, and again, with all fairness, the Japanese culture goes back, centuries and centuries, and it's I get that. So we've got this amalgamation of people coming from all over the world with different cultural mores, and
Right.
trying to figure out how all this is going to mesh. And we have no culture. Our culture is the Super Bowl. It's like one thing we can agree on. Yeah, let's have a Super Bowl party. I mean, that's about it. It just, and when they took prayer out of the schools, to me, that's where everything really started to spiral. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I agree. And, one of the things that I look at when I think about that, and this curriculum is based on ethics, and morality. And that's very hard to get into a school system, because the first thing they're going to say is, no, we don't want your religion.
Right, exactly.
We don't want your
Church and state, separation of church and state. Here we go.
religion,
Right.
Out of our schools. But my way around that is it's historical. Morality has been talked about by philosophers for thousands and thousands of years before Christ.
And let me break in. And no matter where you're from, you carry a certain morality with you. I mean, whether it's Europe or South America or, Alaska, it doesn't matter. There's universal morality, which ties it together.
True. Yeah, universal truths that we consider a priori, that where even some have argued and said, if you raise someone in a society that accepts murder, then they will be just raised to think that murder is okay, murdering innocent people. And that's just not true. So that's been disproven by many scientific studies. And so we know that there are truths to morality. So if we can integrate some of this morality and these ethics inside our curriculum from a historical standpoint, it's very hard for them to deny that. because it does have a lot to do with ethical dilemmas have a lot to do with critical thinking, and it is a social science. And so we're going in the path of not philosophy of religion, but as philosophy of social integration, as a social science, ethics and morality.
Let me answer something. Again, I'll look at my high school experience. You know, I remember I think it was my junior year. I was in a rock band, we were playing and stuff. We were all introduced to pot, and that was it. It was over. From there it went into LSD and mescaline, and I was at Woodstock. I was a hippie. Unlike our former president, Bill Clinton, I inhaled as deeply and as often as I possibly could. Thank God the Lord delivered me from all that. But the influx of drugs from where I was, almost 60 years ago now, not quite, but almost 60 years ago, to where it is now, and the availability and the legalization of it. I mean, my gosh, the inmates are running the asylum. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that has a really, really taken a turn. And when I think about, one thing when I think about, drugs, especially psychedelics, I think it does have a lot of answers to consciousness. Because, when we believe that, in the supernatural, that's sure a given. Sure. And that would mean there's other dimensions to this three-dimensional world. And I think psychedelics have kind of opened a door to that. And I'm not endorsing psychedelics at all. But one thing that when it comes to drugs is, we always thought that if we banned drugs, then that would solve the problem, and it didn't. Right? We just had illegal use of drugs, drug dealing.
And we still do. I mean, the fentanyl stuff, all the cocaine coming across them in the whole.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And it's just, that hadn't solved the problem. So we say, well, if we legalize it, then that kind of solves that problem. Now we can do a safe thing with that. But that hasn't worked either. Nothing was raking grabbing. And so I think really, it's understanding what is happening and understanding what is out there, and really, having deep conversations with children that are growing up, because they are going to have to face these issues, these drugs. When there's parties here,
oh yeah,
campuses, they're basically telling you, hey, if you see someone dying, this is how you use Narcan, and that's very sad, because they're saying people are going to be dying today in these parties based on your drugs and everything that they're taking. So be prepared to save their life. And this is how you do it. And so I think it's time, for us to really, open the door to these conversations of really how dangerous these drugs are and do something about it. And a lot of it does come with border security. I'm a big advocate for security when it comes to stopping criminals and illegal drugs.
I agree.
Into this country. I'm a big proponent of that. I don't agree with all the legislation when it comes to immigration. Obviously, coming from a family of immigrants. But I do agree with, we do have to do something that stops these drugs and these dangerous substances coming into our country so easily and being so readily available, because it is hurting, not only innocent people who don't even know. They're thinking I'm just smoking and enjoying. They don't know it's laceful. And so that has been a big problem that I definitely feel needs to be addressed.
Wow. Angel, that's incredible. And folks, we're going to continue this conversation for members only. So you can sign up for that for $9.99 a month. You have access to lots and lots of information. So go check that out. We'll see you on the other side.